Hey guys, good morning. Jerry here with Tiki 7.1. Today I'm going to show you how I built two Harbor Freight greenhouses back to back and put heat in it. So stay tuned.
So last year, early on, I decided I wanted to build a greenhouse. And I started looking online. I looked at Polarium and a lot of other kits. And finally, I settled with Harbor Freight because they had it basically online for around $600 or so. And you could actually get a 25% off coupon. And that took it way down. And so I wanted a 24-foot greenhouse. Theirs is actually 10 by 12. So I actually had to come up with an idea, and that was to build them both back to back, buy two of them, build them back to back, and I would actually be cheaper than a lot of the online kits that you find out there. I've noticed that Harbor Freight has bumped their prices now. They're up over $800 now, but still that 25% coupon will help you. This is what my yard looked like before I put the Tiki garden in and before the greenhouse. And this is where I wanted the greenhouse to go, right in this area right here. And so I got on Photoshop and I kind of took some pictures of it and kind of spliced them together, kind of get an idea of what it would look like in the yard. And then I proceeded. And the next thing I needed to do was do the one call, to do line locates for gas and water and stuff like that. And so I marked out on the yard where it was going to be. And I thought I was going to use those big old cinder blocks there and sink those in the ground, for a footing. I decided later I didn't want to do that much digging. The coupon is usually limit one item. So my dad and Katiie went down to Harbor Freight. They both bought one. And so we wound up having two greenhouses that way. 25% off on both of them. So I started marking out where I'm going to actually run my electric. I am going to have electric and water in this. And then the next thing I did was I decided to go with the smaller concrete blocks, much thinner, don't have to go down in the ground nearly as much. And so I got those placed out, and I actually built the lower base of the thing and laid it out there so I could be really precise with where I was laying this thing out at, because at some point I've also got to join these two things together, so I've got to keep that in mind. Next up, I started digging, and boy was that fun. Lots of digging with this project. Basically, I marked out for each one of those things and then got them in the ground. I used a big long level in order to keep everything leveled up as I went, packed the ground down, and then add rock, crushed pebbles and stuff like that down in the bottom for drainage. But then we got that done, and I had a couple of helpers. They're named No and Charge, and their tools of specialty are the Pulaski axe and the shovel. And basically I did all the digging on this by myself. I'm going to put a sub panel out in the greenhouse. I've got a buddy that's an electrician, so if you're going to do any kind of electrical work, don't do it yourself. If you're not qualified, that's my little disclaimer there. So there you go. We got the line run for the electric and the water. Came across some interesting stuff. This was after the locate. Found an old buried electric line under there that was dead. Then I actually did the run for the water, once again with No in Charge there off to the left. One thing I did for the frost-free hydrant that I put out in the greenhouse is I dug down deeper, I put gravel in, and then I actually put one of those concrete square pavers down in the bottom of it. And then from that point, I actually took a 5-gallon bucket, drilled a hole down in the very bottom where my line was going to come in, and filled that up after I put the frost-free hydrant in the bucket, filled that up with gravel as well once I had the line all connected and all that and watertight. I used PEX tubing as well to run from the house over to the greenhouse. I actually have it disconnectable from our exterior water faucet. I use a heat cable on the exterior of the house. I ran it right down to the bottom, ran it around, and then dropped it in the ground as soon as I got to dirt. The heat cable keeps it from freezing up in the wintertime. It comes on at a certain temperature and shuts off at a certain temperature. And I've got it watertight and sealed up. And I put insulation around it. I gave myself several layers of security there. You can see here where I dropped the electric down out of the roof of the house, took it down into the dirt, and then ran it over. And of course, you want to run your water. If you're going to build a greenhouse and you want water and electric, you need to run that stuff before you start laying your foundation, because it makes it a whole lot easier. Ain't none of that easy when you're digging that by hand by yourself, but it does make it easier when you start putting it together. And so I got my electric run, I got my water line run, and the frost-free stuff in there, and then we can start working on the sub foundation there. And basically for that, what I did is I used 4x4 timbers. Of course, I've got two rectangles that I'm building off of because a Harbor Freight greenhouse really is kind of like an erector set. I put the two rectangles together and I decided I was going to do a lower base of 4x4s and one in the center where the two joined. And then I was going to put another one in the center to join those two rectangles together down at the base. And so that's what I did here, and you can see I've got the bases put together with a 4x4 in between. Now at this point you're going to want a 10 millimeter nut driver. No jokes there. But that's mostly what you're going to be dealing with as far as hardware goes on this thing is a 10 millimeter nut, and so that driver is going to make it really easy, especially if you can ratchet it. And it starts going together pretty quick there over the next several days. We start getting a frame, and all of a sudden it looks like something here. We get our peaks on. I decide, I really need to beef this thing up, so I'm bringing up some upper supports as well. I've seen pictures and horror stories about Harbor Freight greenhouses where the wind picks them up and just basically turns them into a jumble of scrap metal, and I didn't want to have any part of that. So in that lower base channel, there's actually enough room in there for a 2x4, and so I ran 2x4 all the way around the inside as well. Once I screwed that base down to the 4x4s, I got everything square, and then actually really beefed it up really good there. And then we start working on the roof peaks and all of that, and it's starting to come together now. I've got to figure out how in the world am I going to join two greenhouses together at the sides and the roof. But before we get to that, you can see right here, when you have to do the long roof peaks on your greenhouse, probably the easiest thing you can do is take a piece of string, like paracord or whatever, tie it to your roof peak, and then tie it into both of your top peaks where the left and right side join. And then by doing that, you can get on a ladder on the other side, bring the other peak up, and get that sucker assembled, then go back over there and do the other one. So we got that done. We've got peaks on now. Hot dog. It's looking like a doggone greenhouse without the rest of the stuff on it. Here's a couple of views from the side with some nice flowers in the shot. And so getting back to how we join this thing up, I got my tape measure out and I realized that a 2x8 is actually going to fit in there with the spacing of the 4x4. All I had to do was take a 2x8, put it right up to it and draw out, and I got the jigsaw out and I notched this thing out. I took care of the gaps with heavy caulking on both sides and actually used some of that expandable foam as well on the inside of the greenhouse. And here's a wider shot of it right there. That 2x8, it's actually not 8 inches, but it fit perfectly left to right just about. And then I came in from behind with some screws, so I locked that thing down and screwed it from the inside of the greenhouse into the wood with smaller screws. And also I ran a bead of caulk on it before once I got it dry fitted, caulked on the inside of it, put that thing in there, and then came in with screws and locked that thing down there. Next challenge that I've got is doing the roof, and that was a bit of a challenge because what you got to do at this point is where those two 2x8s meet, you got to have that angle right. And so I used a little a gauge deal right there to basically give me my angles for both of them, and then chop sawed it. Got them on there, dry fitted both of them and met them up at the peak, got it exactly where I wanted it, and then I came down, got down off the ladder, and I just marked on the ends and chopped them on the ends, and there you have it right there. Got it put together and basically have them both attached to one another now. And so at this point, it's a matter of building strength. Because of the way that was, I wanted some support in the center, and I had some extra 4x4s, and I thought, what the heck? We kind of made it look like an Amish barn in the center, if you will. I came straight up out of that 4x4 that's in the center where I joined the two. That also gave me the opportunity to give it more strength. Came right up on both sides there. Because at some point, what I'm going to want to do here, of course, is cut these back walls out so that I can actually walk through both of them. I needed that support for that as well. So I ran two 4x4s up. I had to get my angles once again and cut those. And then you can see here, then I came off with a cross beam. And actually, while I was doing this, I started beefing up the perimeter of the greenhouse. I came up with 4x4s on all four corners, on the outside corners as well, because I wanted to come across. I don't want this thing ever going anywhere, and I don't think I'm going to have to worry about it. Here's a close-up look of where I joined the center with the cross bracing, and I actually just did me some cuts there and kind of made it look a little neater there. And then I came up with one 4x4 off of that cross beam right up into the center there, and it kind of looks like this when you step back from it. Gives it a lot of extra support, supports that peak, and made it to where I could cut the back wall out and be able to walk through comfortably. And so the next thing I decided was I really want this thing to be secure and to never blow away. It was springtime, and I had actually seen like I said, seen a news report of somebody's greenhouse that got turned into a nice twisted ball of metal that went down to Davis Iron and Metal for scrap. So I started digging some post holes. Got my post hole diggers out, once again with no in charge, and we started digging holes, and I decided I was going to sink some 4x4s down. Dug out, cut down some 4x4s, popped them in there, screwed them into the side, and then dropped some Quikrete in there, added some water, and we got that thing secure. And while I had the Quikrete out, I went ahead and built a frame around the frost-free hydrant, and I concreted that. That way it wouldn't accidentally get bent or pushed or anything like that. It's not going anywhere now. The next step in your building process when you're building Harbor Freight greenhouses is to do the doors, so we did that. And there's a great forum also I want to mention at this point on Facebook. It's the Harbor Freight Greenhouse Forum. A lot of us on there that have built these things, and so when new people get on there and have questions, never hesitate. You can ask questions here, but also that forum has a great, if I can't respond to you on here, that forum is a great place to go to for that. The next thing we did was put the vents on. One thing I will tell you, because we're getting close to time to do the panels. Those clear panels have got plastic on them that you'll have to peel off. Leave the plastic on until you're ready to actually use it, but also get you some 3M HVAC tape. It's that metallic tape. Seal off the edges, because these things are hollow in the center, and if you don't seal those things off, you're going to get moisture in there, and that's why a lot of people have moisture buildup and they lose a lot of their sunlight and stuff like that. So if you seal it off with that tape, you won't have that problem. So next up, we start putting the panels on. When I did the panels, one thing that you really got to do here is buy you some Lexel, some clear Lexel, L-E-X-E-L. It's an adhesive caulk. I put that on the inside frames where the panels touched, and then I also got some self-tapping neoprene screws. Pre-drill you a hole into the actual metal of the frame where it touches it, and sink that sucker down in there, but don't sink it hard. That'll help keep all of your panels on, because I've also heard horror stories about Harbor Freight greenhouses and those pathetic clips that they have flying off just in a little wind. Mine have never done that because of the way I did that. And so we just went all around. When you get to the roof portion, make sure you do it from one side to the other, because if you start on one side and you kind of go all over the place, you're not going to have a way to get up there to get that final panel on. So start on one side and work your way all the way across, and before you know it, boom, you got yourself a greenhouse that's completely enclosed. So the next step was running the sub panel. Got the sub panel put in, and ran some electrical and some outlets, and of course I used GFI. Then I wanted to put an exhaust fan in. A lot of this stuff, the extra stuff that I got for this, I got off of Amazon. I got an exhaust fan, 18-inch exhaust fan, and it actually came with the temperature controller, the deal where you could set the temperature and all that, and it'll automatically kick on and it'll automatically kick off. It actually takes a temperature reading constantly up in that attic area there. I had to buy I bought two 12-inch vents for the other side to draw the air in. And what I did is I put those down low. That way the upper exhaust fan on the other side of the greenhouse will be sucking the air, and it comes in low and then it rises up high and it helps move that hot air out. Done. Once I got the electrical hooked up, I bought some lights and strung them all the way down. I got about 25 foot of light, and that way I would have some light in there, and you can see what it looked like at night. One thing I did want to do also, I took copper wire, attached it to the frame, and then sunk it down in the ground with rebar as a grounding deal. That way we kept it safe. I had a bunch of clods from where I dug up everything, and so I tilled all of that up, and then I got me, I sprayed it with some Roundup, and then you're not going to do this if you're growing directly in the ground. I'm not growing directly in the ground, so it worked for me. And then once I got it all packed down and leveled out, put some weed block down, because I had to get ready because I had a delivery coming. That was 7 tons of sand, and I had to move it from there to there. I used a four-wheel dump cart, and one cart at a time I started filling it up. I did put some paver gravel down underneath where I was going to put the sand, so it would kind of lock in, and it's done a pretty good job. But then I started filling this thing up with sand, as you can see here, and then it was a matter of starting the work with the pavers, and that was hot and it was hard, and I am so glad that I put the electric in first, because I was able to run fans out there and keep from dying. With the pavers, you're basically going to lay them out, get you a rubber mallet, have a level there so you can have the first one level and then level off of it both directions. I went from right to left, started building this thing out here, and little by little, with a lot of hard work and definitely some knee pads, because if you don't have knee pads on that sand, it'll eat you up. Little by little, we got there, and as you can see, there's one half, and that was a major accomplishment. Getting tickled because I could see the end. There I am, all hot and bothered. Got done. I still had some sand left, as you can see, so I filled some holes, and there it is right there. And then I washed it down, and boy, did that look good. Started bringing some tools in, and then the next thing I did is I actually built a ramp on both sides, because one of the reasons I also wanted to build this back to back is I've got a fenced in backyard patio area. And so I built it into that so that I would have double doors on one side going into the garden area and double doors on the other side close to where my driveway is, so I could take that four-wheel cart or a dolly and get stuff out of the vehicle and bring it in the greenhouse. And when I get done with it, take it right out into the garden. And so that kind of made it convenient. Next thing I did was I actually built a potting bench. Built that out of some of the scraps that I had left over and some dog-eared cedar. So that worked out pretty good. I had a pallet left over. Most of my stuff I got delivered, and so I cut that bad boy in half. I attached it to the potting bench, and as you can see, I used that to store my tools in. And then I got some storage shelves and things like that, and started putting my lighting in, the LED lighting I got off of Amazon. You can get that stuff pretty cheap there. And I also got some of these adjustable ratchet deals to put the lights on, so I can drop them down, I can bring them up. Very, very handy there. And then I set up my drip irrigation, just like the video from years back when I did drip. The same principle here. I've got a water filter, backflow preventer. I've got one of those four-way spigots there coming right off of the frost-free hydrant. And one of them goes to drip, one of them goes to a regular water line, and then I've got some open ones as well. But and I've got a timer there because I wanted to set everything up on timer. Working 53, 60 hours a week, I don't have time for everything that I want out in my garden. I don't have time to keep up with all of it. And one of the things you got to keep up with is watering, and that's an easy way to do it. I put a T-valve in and ran one line up above with some misters, so if I ever needed to, I could mist. The next thing I did, my buddy that's an electrician, he used to work in the heat and air industry, and he's got another family member, and they were able to get me a scratch and dent furnace. You can get these. I actually paid about $550 for it, but I figured that was money well spent. What I thought about doing was getting a 100-pound propane tank and doing one of those little bitty heaters in there. And he said, that's crazy, man. Get the furnace, pay the money up front, instead of having to constantly go get propane all the time when you're running low in the wintertime. You'll just hook right into your gas line. Have a plumber come out and do that. And I was like, okay, let's do that. He told me, he said, all right, next thing I want you to do is build a box. He gave me the dimensions, so I built a box. And then he said, I want you to cut a hole in that box. And so I cut a hole in that box, put the air return vent there. And then we got that thing set up on there. And man, it's starting to look like something now. We got a furnace on there on the box. And then there was some digging again. But this time I did not break out no in charge because the plumbers were coming anyway. Now I did help a little bit because I know how expensive they can be. But I let them dig the line and tapped onto my my house gas. And then we ran a line all the way around the patio and right out to the greenhouse. And then it was just a matter of doing some PVC ductwork and some wiring. My electrician buddy came over and knocked that out for me, and Miss Katiie fed him a nice dinner for that. Boom, we got heat. And I got an electric thermostat mounted right on the side. Now we're in business. I put 3 of those remote thermometers out there to monitor 3 different zones. And as you can see here, this was it was getting into the cooler temperatures there, and it's given me readings for indoors plus all 3 zones in the greenhouse, which is really nice. And we didn't get that a bit too soon done because October of last year, we had an early cold snap. Just before that, we started digging everything up, got them into pots, and got them out there just in the nick of time. My hibiscus made it through. I actually bought a couple of dehumidifiers and have those running out there. And I've got a humidistat, so they'll come on automatically and shut off when they don't need it. Bought some extra lighting. I put my bananas out there, my palm trees, my Hawaiian tea plants, all of that stuff. And you can see at nighttime with the light, looks really cool. And they did okay. And I actually started palm trees out there. Once my plumerias, I started plumerias in December, just being under the light. Man, they started growing. I'll tell you one little trick also before I leave here, and that is Mylar. You know, the emergency blankets like you can get at Walmart or on Amazon. If you put Mylar on the north wall of a greenhouse, it's going to give you a little extra R factor, but it's also going to reflect the light, and it does help. But you can see also here are the plumerias. They're growing in the greenhouse under lights, and they even started putting on blooms in the greenhouse. The main thing is your temperature, your light, and your water. And if they get that, they don't care what month it is as long as they're getting what they need. And so there it is, my greenhouse. Keeping our tropicals alive costs us some money up front, but it's going to save us a lot of money every year versus going down to the garden center. That is for sure. And as a matter of fact, once we got all the plants in the greenhouse, guess what? We had to put more in the house, and so I rigged up some lighting in our foyer and in our dining room area. Got that great big greenhouse, and we still wound up putting a bunch of plants in the house, which is okay, because in the wintertime it's good to have green living plants. Here's one last shot of the greenhouse. This was actually January 1st. There was frost on the ground, and when I walked inside, there it is. Everything's nice and healthy and happy, and so there you have it. That's how I built 2 Harbor Freight greenhouses back to back. One last shot here. This is back in March when I pulled everything out. They can take it for several months, but they really wanted to get out and get some real sun. Be careful when you do pull your stuff out of the greenhouse in the springtime though, because they have had a little extra shade. They can still sunburn, so do be careful of that. Guys, I want to thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, post them down in the comments below, and thanks again, and Okule Maluna.